He was just a struggling single dad, exhausted, running on caffeine in a quiet, desperate fear, trying to survive the night. But when he accidentally texted, "I love you," to his strict, terrifying white boss instead of his sister, he thought he had signed his own termination letter. Have you ever made a mistake so big, so instantaneous, that you felt the air physically leave your lungs? A mistake you knew deep in your bones you couldn't undo no matter how hard you prayed? Tyrell prepared to lose everything. He prepared for the eviction notice, the hunger, the shame of failing his little girl. But when his boss, the woman they called the Iceberg, showed up at his apartment door in the middle of the night, she wasn't holding a pink slip. She was holding a secret that would change both of their lives forever. This is a story about how the biggest mistake of your life might just be the miracle you didn't know you needed. Welcome back to True Black Tales. If you've ever felt like the weight of the world was resting on your shoulders and you were one bad day away from collapsing, this story is for you. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean that Tuesday night. It just made the city look gray and feel heavier. It was a cold, relentless downpour, the kind that seeps into the brickwork of old buildings and makes the bones ache. For Tyrell, the relentless drumming against the single-pane window of his small third-floor apartment was the soundtrack to his life lately, gray, heavy, and unrelenting. He sat at his kitchen table, a chipped laminate surface that currently doubled as his desk, his dining room, and the altar where he sacrificed his sleep. It was 11:58 p.m. The apartment was dim, shadowed in the corners where the light didn't reach. The only illumination came from the harsh blue glow of his laptop screen and a flickering street lamp outside that buzzed like an angry hornet, casting long, dancing shadows across the peeling yellow wallpaper. Tyrell rubbed his eyes, his fingers tracing the deep, dark circles beneath them. He pressed the heels of his hands into his sockets until he saw stars. He was only 32 years old, but if you caught his reflection in the dark window glass, the slump of his shoulders, the graying stubble on his chin, you would swear he was 50. He carried a kind of exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix, a bone-deep weariness that came from carrying the world alone. On the screen in front of him was a spreadsheet that seemed to have no end. It was the quarterly projection report for Harrison & Co. Logistics. Rows upon rows of fuel costs, shipping lanes, driver overtime, and profit margins. To anyone else, it was just numbers. To Tyrell, it was a minefield. And waiting for it was the woman known around the office, and perhaps in Tyrell's nightmares, as the Iceberg, Julianne Harrison. She was his boss, a woman of sharp angles, icy glares, and even sharper words. She was 45, impeccably dressed in monochromatic suits, charcoal, slate, midnight blue, that cost more than Tyrell's entire wardrobe combined. She possessed a gaze that could freeze a fresh cup of coffee from across the room. She never raised her voice. She didn't have to. A single raised eyebrow from Julianne Harrison, or the way she would slowly tap her manicured fingernail on a desk, was enough to send junior associates scrambling to pack their boxes. Tyrell had seen it happen just last month. A young guy, fresh out of college, had misspelled a client's name on a presentation. Julianne hadn't yelled. She just looked at him, handed him the paper, and said, "Details matter. You clearly do not." The guy was gone by lunch. Tyrell couldn't afford to be gone by lunch. He couldn't afford a single mistake. He typed furiously, his tired brain trying to synthesize rows of complicated data into a coherent summary. The fan on his old laptop whirred loudly, struggling to keep up. In the next room, a sound broke the rhythmic drumming of the rain. It was a soft, rattling cough. Tyrell froze, his hands hovering over the keyboard. His heart skipped a beat. It was Maya, his 6-year-old daughter. He pushed the laptop away and crept into the bedroom, moving silently across the creaky floorboards he had memorized to avoid waking her. The room was cool. He kept the thermostat low to save on the gas bill. Maya was curled up under a pink duvet, clutching a worn-out stuffed rabbit that had lost one of its ears years ago. Her forehead was glistening with sweat. The fever she'd had earlier had broken, thankfully, but the asthma that plagued her whenever the seasons changed was still lingering. He listened. The sound was there, a faint, high-pitched wheeze on the exhale. It was the sound that haunted Tyrell's dreams. It meant expensive inhalers. It meant nebulizer treatments in the middle of the night. It meant fear. He sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, just watching the rise and fall of her chest. He brushed a stray braid from her face, his heart aching with a fierce, protective love that was almost painful. She looked so much like her mother. She had Alicia's chin, Alicia's eyelashes. The pain hit him then, a sharp pang in the center of his chest, familiar and dull, like an old injury that refused to heal. It had been 2 years since Alicia collapsed in this very hallway, just outside the bedroom door. It wasn't a car crash. It wasn't a long battle with illness that gave them time to say goodbye or make videos for the future. It was a cerebral aneurysm. 1 minute she was laughing about a burnt piece of toast, teasing Tyrell about his cooking, and the next she was on the floor. Just like that. The silence she left behind was louder than any noise Tyrell had ever heard. Since that day, Tyrell had been drowning. Rent, medical bills for Maya's asthma specialists, the rising cost of after-school care, groceries, utilities. It was a rising tide, and he was barely keeping his nose above water. He took the job at Harrison & Co. because it paid 20% better than his old one. He thought it was his salvation, but the stress was eating him alive. He walked on eggshells every single day, terrified that one wrong move, 1 decimal point in the wrong place, would leave him unemployed and his daughter without the health insurance she desperately needed. His phone buzzed in his pocket, vibrating against his leg and startling him out of his memories. He pulled it out, squinting at the brightness in the dark room. It was a text from her, the iceberg. The message read, "Where is the projection, Tyrell? You promised it by midnight. It is 11:59. Do not make me regret hiring you." The text was dry, cold, and terrifying. Panic surged through him like an electric shock. He rushed back to the kitchen, nearly tripping over a pair of Maya's sneakers left in the hallway. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He had less than a minute. "Focus, Tyrell, focus," he told himself. "Do not lose this. Do not lose everything." He sat down, his hands shaking. He finished the email to Miss Harrison, attaching the spreadsheet. He checked the file name 3 times. He checked the recipient address twice. He hit send on the email at exactly 12 a.m. He let out a breath, wiping cold sweat from his brow. He had done it. He had survived another day.
But his mind was scattered. The adrenaline crash was hitting him hard. He was so tired. His vision was blurring at the edges. He remembered he needed to send a text to his sister, Alana. Alana was the only reason he was still functioning. She was coming over tomorrow morning to watch Maya so he could go into the office. He needed to confirm the time, and he wanted to tell Alana that he loved her for helping him out, for being the only lifeline he had left in a world that felt increasingly lonely. Or maybe, in his exhaustion, he was just thinking about the words he had whispered to Maya moments ago. "I love you. I'm here." His thumb hovered over the messaging app. He saw the name at the top of the recent list. In his blurred vision, he thought it was Alana. It had to be Alana. She was the only person he texted this late. He typed quickly, desperate to close his eyes. He typed, "I love you. Thank you for everything." He hit send. He closed his eyes, exhaling a breath he felt like he'd been holding for 12 hours. He was done. He could sleep for 5 hours before the alarm went off. Ping. He opened one eye. A delivery notification? A reply from Alana? He looked at the phone. The blood drained from his face so fast it left him dizzy. The room seemed to tilt sideways, the walls closing in. The Hassingen hadn't gone to Alana. It hadn't gone to a draft folder. It sat there in a bright blue bubble right underneath the demand for the spreadsheet. To Boss/Miss Harrison, I love you, thank you for everything. Time stopped. The rain outside seemed to silence itself. The buzzing street lamp went mute. All Tyrell could hear was the rushing of his own blood in his ears, a roar like the ocean. "No," he whispered, his voice cracking into the empty room. "No, no, no, please." He frantically tapped the screen, his fingers clumsy with terror. He tried to recall the message, tried to find a delete button, tried to find a way to stop the signal. But there was a standard SMS. There was no unsend. There was no taking it back. Once it was out there, it was etched in stone. He had just told his icy, professional, terrifying boss, a woman who fired people for using the wrong font size, a woman who had never smiled in his presence, that he loved her. It looked like harassment. It looked like unprofessionalism. It looked like insanity. He imagined her reading it in her penthouse, surrounded by marble and glass. He imagined her lip curling in disgust. He imagined the HR meeting first thing in the morning. Tyrell, due to inappropriate conduct, he imagined the security guard escorting him out with a cardboard box of his things while everyone stared and whispered. He quickly typed again, his fingers shaking so badly he dropped the phone onto the table with a clatter. He snatched it back up, nearly cracking the screen. "Miss Harrison, I am so sorry. That was a mistake. Wrong number. That was meant for my sister. Please forgive me. I am so sorry." He hit send. He stared at the screen, braying, begging the universe for mercy.
12:03 a.m. She had seen it. She had seen the "I love you," and she had seen the frantic apology. He waited for the 3 dots that indicated typing. He waited for a reply. He waited for the inevitable text saying, "Don't bother coming in tomorrow." Nothing. The screen remained blank. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 30. Tyrell put his head in his hands, gripping his hair. The silence was worse than a scream. If she had fired him immediately, at least he would know. But this silence, it was torture. He was going to lose this job. He was going to lose the health insurance. Without that job, how would he pay rent next month? The eviction moratorium was over. They would be on the street. He had failed. He had finally failed Alicia. He promised her on that terrible day in the hospital hallway that he would keep their family safe, and he had ruined it all with a slip of a thumb. "I'm sorry, baby," he whispered to the empty kitchen, speaking to a ghost. "I tried. I really tried. I need you to be honest in the comments right now. Have you ever sent a text to the wrong person that made your heart stop? Or maybe you've made a mistake at work that you thought was the end of the world. Tell me I'm not the only one who has felt that cold, suffocating grip of panic." He didn't sleep. He couldn't. Tyrell sat in the bark kitchen, the laptop screen now black, staring at the front door as if the police were about to kick it down. The minutes dragged by like hours. 12:30, 12:45, 1 a.m. His mind replayed every interaction he had ever had with Julianne Harrison. The time she critiqued his tie. The time she sent back a report because the margins were off by a millimeter. She was a machine. A brilliant, efficient, heartless machine, and he had just thrown a wrench into her gears. He looked around the apartment. It was clean, but it was worn. The sofa was sagging in the middle. The rug was threadbare. But it was home. It was safe. And now it felt precarious. He thought about the bank balance on his phone app. $42.15 until payday on Friday. If he was fired tomorrow, he wouldn't get his severance immediately. He would have to fight for unemployment. That took weeks. In those weeks, the asthma medication would run out. The fridge would go empty. He started doing the math on the back of a napkin, his hand trembling. Rent is $1,200, light is $80, food is $200, inhaler copay is $50. The numbers didn't add up without the paycheck. They never did. At 1:15 a.m., the silence of the apartment was shattered. Bzzz. The buzzer. The loud, jarring buzz of the intercom rang through the hallway like a gunshot. Tyrell jumped, knocking his knee against the table leg. Pain shot up his leg, sharp and hot, but he barely felt it. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might bruise his ribs. Who would be buzzing him at 1:15 in the morning in this neighborhood? Panic surged again, different this time. Police? Had something happened to Alana? Was it the landlord coming to complain about noise even though they had been silent? Or worse, had something happened to him? He walked to the intercom by the door, his feet feeling heavy like he was walking through water. He pressed the talk button. "Hello?" "It's Julian Harrison." The voice was distorted by the static of the old rusted speaker system, but the authority was unmistakable. It was cold. It was precise. It was her. Tyrell felt his legs turn to jelly. He had to grab the doorframe to stay upright. She had come personally? She was so angry, so offended by his text, that she drove from her upscale neighborhood to his apartment in the middle of a thunderstorm to fire him to his face? Why would she do that? Was she bringing legal papers? Was she bringing the police to file a harassment charge? I'll buzz you in, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. He pressed the unlock button. The buzz echoed back. He unlocked his own apartment door and stood in the hallway. The building was old and the elevator had been broken for 3 months. The landlord kept promising to fix it, but he never did. That meant Julian Harrison, the woman who wore Italian leather heels, was walking up 3 flights of concrete stairs. He heard the heavy metal door downstairs open and close. Then the footsteps. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound of her heels on the stone steps was slow and deliberate. It echoed up the stairwell. It sounded like a countdown. Tyrell held his breath. He wanted to run. He wanted to grab Maya from her bed, climb out the fire escape, and disappear. But he was a grown man. He was a father. He had to face the consequences of his mistake. He stood there, wearing a wrinkled dress shirt stained with coffee from 6 hours ago and gray sweatpants. He wasn't wearing shoes. He looked a mess. He felt like a criminal awaiting the executioner. Julian Harrison appeared on the landing. She was wearing a trench coat belted tightly at the waist, a dark beige color that probably cost more than Tyrell's car. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that severe, tight bun she always wore, not a strand out of place despite the weather. She held a black umbrella that was collapsed, dripping rainwater onto the dirty hallway floor. She looked completely out of place in his building. The hallway smelled of old cooking oil and damp carpet. The light fixture above her head was flickering, buzzing like a dying insect. She looked like a diamond sitting in a coal bin. But as she stepped under the flickering hallway light, Tyrell saw something he had never seen before. Her face. Usually her face was a mask of impassive boredom or stern judgment, but tonight her skin looked pale, and her eyes weren't cold, they were red, rimmed with pink, swollen, as if she had been crying. "Miss Harrison," Tyrell breathed, stepping back to let her in. The fear was making his throat tight. I can explain. The text, it was for my sister, Alana. She's helping me with my daughter. I was tired. I didn't mean any disrespect. Please, I need this job. I'll do anything. I'll take double shifts. I'll take a pay cut." He was babbling, the desperation pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. He couldn't stop. The terror of poverty was speaking for him.
Julianne didn't speak immediately. She closed her umbrella and leaned it against the wall by the door, careful not to let it touch his coat rack. She walked into the apartment, her heels clicking on the cheap laminate flooring. She looked around. She didn't look with judgment exactly. She looked with intensity. She saw the peeling paint in the corner where the water damage was. She saw the stack of unpaid bills on the counter labeled urgent in red ink. She saw the empty fruit bowl. She saw the child's drawings taped to the fridge, stick figures of a dad and a girl holding hands under a big yellow sun drawn in crayon. She looked at Tyrell, really looked at him, stripped of the office fluorescent lights and the cheap suit he wore to work. She saw a man holding on by a thread. "Is your daughter here?" she asked softly. Her voice lacked its usual steel. It sounded tired, hoarse. "She's sleeping," Tyrell said, instinctively stepping slightly in front of the bedroom door, guarding it. She has bad asthma. She had a fever tonight. She's resting. Please, don't wake her."
Julianne nodded slowly. She reached into her large, expensive leather tote bag. Tyrell flinched. He physically recoiled. He expected the termination letter. He expected a severance check if he was lucky, or a legal notice if he wasn't. Instead, she pulled out a thermos, a silver, dented thermos that looked like it had seen better days, and a brown paper bag grease-stained at the bottom. "I didn't come to fire you, Tyrell," she said. Tyrell blinked, confused. The adrenaline was still pumping through him, making him shake, but his brain couldn't process her words. You didn't?" "No." She walked to the kitchen table, the same table where he had almost ruined his life, and set the items down. "I came because you said, 'Thank you for everything,' and then you panicked." "It was a mistake," Tyrell repeated, his voice weak. "I swear." "I know," she said. She unbuttoned her damp trench coat. Underneath, she wasn't wearing her usual power suit. She was wearing a simple black sweater and slacks. She looked smaller. "And then you sent the apology," she continued, her eyes fixed on the brown bag. "And you said you were texting your sister about your daughter." She looked up at him. The silence stretched between them, heavy and thick. "My son would have been 6 this year," she whispered. The silence in the kitchen was sudden and absolute. The humming of the refrigerator seemed to stop. The rain outside seemed to hold its breath. Tyrell stared at her, his mouth slightly open. He had worked for her for 8 months. He knew her schedule. He knew her coffee order, black, 2 ice cubes. He knew her signature, but he knew nothing about her life. I didn't know you had a son," Tyrell said, his voice gentle now. The fear was evaporating, replaced by a sudden, confusing wave of empathy. "Nobody at the office knows," Julianne whispered. She looked at her hands, twisting a plain silver ring on her finger. "His name was Leo. 2 years ago, I was at work, late, like always. We were closing the deal on the Anderson account. Do you remember reading about that merger?" Tyrell nodded dumbly. It was the deal that made the company millions. "Leo was with the nanny," she said, her voice trembling. "He had a severe allergic reaction to peanuts, anaphylaxis. The nanny, she panicked. She couldn't find the EpiPen. It was in the bag, but she couldn't find it." She looked up at Tyrell, and the iceberg melted completely. Tears pooled in her eyes, spilling over her lashes and running down her pale cheeks. "By the time they called me, by the time I got to the hospital," she couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Tyrell felt a lump form in his own throat, huge and painful. He knew that rush. He knew that phone call. The race against time you were destined to lose. The bargaining with the universe in the car. "Take me instead. Take anything, just not them." "I buried myself in the work," Julianne continued, wiping her face with the back of her hand, a gesture so childish and raw it broke Tyrell's heart. "I became what I am, hard, unfeeling. Because if I stopped working, if I stopped being the boss, I would have to remember that I'm a mother with no child to hold." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "My husband, he couldn't handle the grief, and he couldn't handle me. He said I was too cold. He said I had turned into stone. He left 6 months after Leo died. He didn't understand that the cold was the only thing keeping me together. If I thawed out, I would fall apart." She gestured to the phone lying on the table between them. "When you texted that by mistake, it reminded me of the last text my husband sent me before he left. He said, 'I loved you, but you're gone.'" She looked at Tyrell with an intensity that burned. "And then, when you said you were a father, and you were thanking your sister for help, I realized something. You are raising a little girl alone, aren't you?" Tyrell nodded, unable to speak. He cleared his throat, fighting back his own tears. "My wife, Alicia, aneurysm, 2 years ago." 2 years, Julianne echoed. "A cruel timeline. We are walking the same path, Tyrell. 2 ghosts in the same office, passing each other every day." She pushed the brown bag toward him. When I was driving around, I do that when I can't sleep. The silence in my house, it's too loud. When I got your text, I was near a 24-hour diner on 5th. I brought you some soup, chicken noodle, and coffee, not the sludge from the office break room. I figured if you were up working this late, you probably hadn't eaten. Tyrell felt the sting of hot tears in his eyes. He looked at the bag. He hadn't realized how hungry he was. He had skipped dinner to save the food from Maya's lunchbox the next day. "Why?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why would you do this for me? I'm just an employee. You barely look at me usually." "Because I know what that panic feels like. The panic of thinking the world is crashing down on you. I saw your face in the office yesterday, Tyrell. I saw the dark circles. I saw the frayed cuffs of your shirt. I saw how you look at the clock at 5 p.m., desperate to leave, but terrified to be the first one out the door."
I ignored it because it's easier to be a boss than a human being. But tonight, that text, you broke the spell. We often judge people by the armor they wear to work, don't we? We see the suit, the title, the cold expression, and we assume they have it all together. We assume they are invincible. But we never really know what heavy battles they are fighting in private. We never know who is crying in their car before they walk into the building. We never know whose heart is breaking while they sign checks. Julianne stood up. She walked over to the fridge. She reached out and touched the drawing of Maya and Tyrell. Her finger traced the stick figure of the little girl with the lopsided pigtails. "You're a good father, Tyrell. I can see it. I can see it in how terrified you were of losing this job. You weren't scared for yourself. You were scared for her." "I do it all for her," Tyrell said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's all I have. I promised Alicia I would take care of her. I promised I wouldn't let her struggle." Julianne turned back to him. She reached into her purse again. Tyrell tensed up. Old habits die hard. The fear of the pink slip was still there, lurking in the back of his mind. She pulled out a folder. It was blue. It looked official. "This isn't termination papers," she said, anticipating his fear. She slid it across the table. Tyrell looked down. He opened the folder with shaking hands. It was a job description. Senior Logistics Manager. "I've been looking for a senior logistics manager for the new Midwest division. The pay is 40% higher than what you're making now. The hours are better. 9 to 5, strict, no weekends, no late nights. Full benefits, including the premium health insurance plan, the one that covers specialists and brand name inhalers with zero copay." Tyrell's mouth fell open. He looked from the paper to her. The numbers on the page were life-changing. It was enough to pay off the debt. It was enough to move to a better apartment, one with an elevator and no mold. "Miss Harrison, I don't have the seniority," he stammered. "I've only been here 8 months. There are people who have been there for 5 years. Robert, Susan." "They have the time," she said firmly, the old Julianne peeking through, but softer this time. "But they don't have the drive. You have the work ethic, Tyrell. I see how you work. I see the quality of your reports. But more importantly, you have the motivation. I need someone I can trust, someone who understands that life is more than just the numbers on a screen. Someone who knows what it means to lose, and therefore knows the value of what they have." She leaned forward. "I need a human being in that role, not a robot. I need someone who understands that when a shipment of medicine is late, it matters to a family somewhere. You understand that." She buttoned her coat, preparing to leave. The air in the room had changed. It wasn't cold anymore. It felt warm. It felt like hope. "Take the promotion, Tyrell. Go home to your daughter at 5 o'clock. Don't be like me. Don't let the job be the only thing you have left. Leo would have wanted me to help someone. I think he would have liked that." Tyrell stood up. His legs felt steady for the first time in hours. He looked at this woman, this iceberg who had turned out to be a grieving mother just trying to survive the rain. "Thank you," he said.
He wanted to say more, but the words stuck in his throat. "I don't know what to say. Thank you." "Don't say anything," she said, opening the door. She looked back at him one last time. "And Tyrell?" "Yes. Tomorrow, take the day off. Paid. It's on me." "But the report?" "The report will be there on Thursday," she said. "Take Maya to the park if the weather clears. Or just build a fort in the living room. Watch cartoons. Make her breakfast. Childhood doesn't wait, Tyrell. Work does." She stepped out into the hallway, opening her umbrella with a snap. "Good night, Tyrell." "Good night, Miss Harrison." She paused. She looked at him over her shoulder. "Call me Julianne," she said. And for the first time in the 8 months he had known her, for the first time in the 2 years since her son died, a small, genuine smile touched her lips. It was sad, it was fragile, but it was real. She turned and walked away. He listened to her footsteps fading down the stairs. Click, clack, click, clack. But this time, it didn't sound like a countdown to doom. It sounded like a rhythm of change. Tyrell locked the door. He leaned his forehead against the painted wood for a long moment, breathing in the smell of the damp hallway and the fresh coffee on his table. He walked back to the kitchen. He opened the thermos. Steam rose up, smelling of rosemary and chicken. He poured the coffee. It was still hot. He sat down and put his head on the table, burying his face in his arms. And finally, he wept. He didn't cry from sorrow. He didn't cry from fear. He wept from relief. Pure, washing, overwhelming relief. If this story is touching your heart, please hit the like button. It helps us share this message of healing with more people who might need it today. Sometimes we all need a reminder that we aren't alone in our struggles. Tyrell cried because for the first time since Alicia died, he didn't feel entirely alone in the storm. Someone had seen him, not just as an employee number, not just as a struggling statistic, but as a father. Someone had reached out a hand when he expected a slap. After a few minutes, he wiped his face with a paper towel. He felt lighter. He felt like he could breathe again. He ate the soup, feeling the warmth spread through his chest, settling his stomach. He drank the coffee, letting the caffeine wake him up, not for work, but for life. He turned off the kitchen light and walked into the bedroom. The room was quiet, save for the rhythmic sound of the rain, which had slowed to a gentle drizzle. Maya shifted in her sleep, coughing lightly. Tyrell lay down on top of the covers beside her, careful not to wake her. He reached out and held her small hand. Her fingers curled around his thumb in her sleep. He listened to the rain outside. It was still falling, but it didn't sound heavy anymore. It didn't sound like it was trying to drown him. It sounded like water, washing the grime away, washing away the fear, making room for something new, making room for growth. He closed his eyes, thinking of the text message that started it all. A mistake, a slip of the finger, a moment of exhaustion. "I love you. Thank you for everything." Maybe, he thought as he drifted off to sleep, maybe it wasn't a mistake after all. Maybe it was exactly what needed to be said. Maybe the universe knew that Julianne needed to hear those words just as much as he needed to say them. She needed to be reminded that love still existed, and he needed to be reminded that mercy still existed. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds. Tyrell didn't set an alarm. When Maya woke up, pulling on his ear to wake him, he didn't rush to get dressed. He didn't check his email. He made pancakes. They built a fort out of the sofa cushions. They laughed. And somewhere across the city, in a lonely penthouse, Julianne sat with a cup of coffee, looking at a photo of a little boy named Leo. And for the first time in 2 years, she didn't feel cold. Thank you for watching True Black Tales. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel. We are building a community here, a family, where we share stories about the resilience of the human spirit, the power of fatherhood, and the hidden battles we all fight. Remember, you never know what someone is going through behind closed doors. You never know the grief they carry in their pockets. Be kind, be patient, and don't be afraid to send that text to the people you love. Just make sure you check the name first. But even if you don't, maybe it's exactly what needs to happen. I'll see you in the next video. Stay blessed.